I am Flavia Zimmerman from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Professor Ben Reilly from the University of Western Australia, and today we are going to be discussing Australia's soft power and soft power thinking in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you for being with us, Professor Reilly.
Hi Flavia, thanks.
Professor Reilly, if you can please explain to us how Australia's soft power has been underutilized.
So we might start with what soft power is. This is a term that is normally credited to a Harvard professor, Joe Nye, from the 1990s, so it's been around for a while. And it's essentially the argument that countries can get what they want in international affairs, not just through the traditional mechanisms of hard power, by which people normally think of things like military power, direct coercion, also economic power, hard economic power, going and buying Greenland, for example. But you can also get things in international affairs through your attraction. You can persuade others to do things that you want without force or coercion, but rather through the appeal and attraction of your own country's model, your own country's values, your own country's culture, policies. So that's the idea of soft power, that a lot can be achieved in international relations by persuasion and emulation rather than by direct coercion. Why has Australia's soft power been underutilised? It's a good question. I think part of it is that until recently, soft power was not really in the lexicon of our foreign affairs policy. It wasn't really discussed widely amongst our international bureaucrats. It wasn't a concept that our politicians referred to. Now, over the last decade, that's changed, and the foreign policy white paper that was released in 2017, I think, spent quite, I can double check, 2018, spent quite a lot of, no, 2017, I was right the first time, spent quite a lot of time, in fact it had a whole chapter on soft power and how Australia could achieve its objectives by persuading and influencing others. So I think it's historically been underutilised, probably less so today. It's really now come of age in Australian thinking. The problem is, as it's come of age in Australian thinking, our actual soft power has probably diminished. So we probably had more soft power a decade ago when we weren't thinking about it much than we have today when the concept has become mainstreamed.
Thank you. And if you can please explain to us how Australia's soft power initiatives can have an influence in the Indo-Pacific region.
Well, again, I think we need to be clear what we're talking about then. And if we go back to the foreign policy white paper, they actually specified a couple of areas that Australian soft power was distinguished by. So they talked about our democracy, our multicultural society, the strength of the Australian economy, our attractive lifestyle, which is an interesting one, our world-class institutions. And I think all of those, you can make a claim that they are, elements of potential soft power for Australia, some more than others in terms of operationalising. So the fact that we're a democracy, I'm going to talk tonight if I have time about how some ideas about forming democratic networks in the Indo-Pacific, such as the quadrilateral dialogue, come out of this thinking about democracy as a form of soft power. Other things, an attractive lifestyle, well, that might be nice for the people who are here. It's not clear how that's something that you can use to get other countries to to do what you want. But, you know, we can talk about that as well. So there's, I think, some areas where Australia's thinking on soft power has been quite clear, and there's a clear progression from the policy into actual action and operation, and in other areas where it's much more fuzzy and much more underdeveloped, which is why I called the title of my talk tonight Soft Power and Soft Thinking in the Indo-Pacific.
Oh, thank you. And if you could please unpack a little bit more how Australian soft power and soft power thinking has been incorporated into Australian foreign policy. And if you could talk a little bit more about the white paper, how this was translated into the 2017 white paper.
So, so I think what's happened is over the last decade, there's been a real shift, firstly in the way we think about our role in Asia and now the Indo-Pacific. And secondly, how we think about the importance of values in foreign policy. And the two have come together. So what's, if I was to tell the story very briefly, if we go back a decade or so, we had a white paper back in, I think it was 2012, the Asian Century White Paper, which was extremely positive about our future in Asia, but saw it almost entirely in terms of economic benefits and economic gains. Saw China as clearly emerging as a responsible stakeholder, progressing towards a more open and liberal political system, just as it was becoming more open economically, and saw a very unproblematic relationship between Australia and the broader region. I think none of those things proved to be accurate. The situation today, you know, not even 10 years later, is quite different, and the rise of China and the realisation that China is not going to democratise, it's going to grow rich, it's growing very powerful, but it's not going to become a democracy, it's not going to play by the same rules as Australia and the other countries that have become used to under this sort of Pax Americana that we've had since the end of the Second World War. All of those things sharpen for Australian policymakers the sense that we need to think about the differences between Australia and you know, big states like China. We have different values, and that also encouraged people to start looking around for who our partners, our real partners in Asia might be. So I mentioned earlier the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. That's a partnership between Australia, Japan, the United States and India, and the bedrock idea there is that these are the four big democracies in the region. Now, that makes sense from an Australian point of view, it makes sense from an American point of view. It's not as clear if it makes sense from an Indian point of view, for example, to be cooperating with Australia. In fact, India's been quite happy to work together with Japan and US on a range of military initiatives and just leave Australia out altogether. So there's now an attempt, and I think it's a very nascent and stumbling attempt, to try and inject some of these ideas like values into our foreign policy. And this is what we're struggling with now. How, okay, we see that this is important, we see that this is a really important element of our soft power. How do we make that real? And that's really where we are now, struggling with this big question.
Thank you. And wrapping up our interview, if you could please just explain a little bit more how Australian soft power and soft power thinking can benefit Australian strategy in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, this is the question, can it? I would say it can. I mean, I think that things like a rules-based international order, which is something, again, one of these shibboleths that has become like a mantra. We didn't talk about it a decade ago. Now it's, you know, I think it was mentioned 30 or 40 times in the last white paper. If we want to have a rules-based order, then we need to be cooperating with countries that respect the rules. You know, that actually abide by and see value in committing to rules. And those typically are countries that respect rules and a rules-based order domestically as well as internationally. So again, we're talking about the democracies, plus maybe Singapore and one or two other countries. So what I think it's likely to do is to create new networks and new kinds of groupings for Australia to really find a common ground in countries like Japan that are very different to us in many ways, but share this fundamental commitment to a rules-based order, a free and open Indo-Pacific, democracy at home. So this creates a new way of putting together a regional order for Australia that's quite different to the way we used to think about it, which was very much just based on power politics and economic benefits. So I think it's helping to transition Australia slowly into a new era, and I think the way that the term Indo-Pacific has now become so central to a lot of discussions of our region is part of that. So the rise of the values-based foreign policy and the rise of the term Indo-Pacific have come about at the same time and have this common underpinning.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Great, pleasure. Thank you.
And for more information, please visit our website www.internationalaffairs.org.au. Thank you.
Great.